Good morning to those here on location at the UW eScience Institute, and good morning, afternoon, or evening to those who are attending remotely. My name is Brendan, for those of you who don't know me, and I head up the UX efforts at Orcasound. We're really excited to run our first of hopefully many Orcasound Leadership Summits this year, and the agenda is jam-packed with sessions meant to inform the general Orcasound contributor community about where we've been in 2024 and before, and where we are going in 2025 so that we can discuss what we're going to work on. To that end, I'd like to share the agenda for today. Many of you may have looked at this, but just wanted to go over it in a bit more detail right now. So we began with arrival and a light breakfast for those in person here at the eScience Institute. Lots of carbs and coffee, so if you're here, please take your fill of that stuff. We are now experiencing the kickoff remarks, which should last no longer than 15 minutes. We'll then transition to a presentation by Dr. Dave Bain and others, maybe others, about the current state of the southern resident killer whales. After, we'll hear from Orcasound leaders about progress made in a variety of disciplines from dev, UX, AI, and others. We'll take a 15-minute break to stretch our legs and possibly grab any leftover donuts and snacks for those of us on location. We'll come back for a 45-minute session for my presentation on what the UX team worked on in 2024 and before, and I'll lead discussion on how UX can better function within Orcasound to bring the user perspective to everything we deploy. Then we'll enjoy a hands-on build a hydrophone workshop, which will be recorded and streamed live for those participating remotely. We'll break for an hour lunch, which is catered here at the eScience Institute. After lunch, we'll come back and I'll lead a 30-minute discussion on funding, the current state and what funding platforms we are using, how you can potentially raise your own funding for the work that you do at Orcasound. Then we'll learn about how Orcasound is currently governed and talk about possible changes coming in 2025. We'll break again for 15 minutes for an afternoon lake stretch and snacks. We'll come back for the purpose of the summit to discuss priorities for the work we'll do in 2025. After learning about what we've accomplished in 2024 and before and what we could work on in 2025, we'll build an initial priority matrix that will be a working document in the next couple of weeks while we discuss and gather feedback from the Orcasound contributor community. The last session of the day will be about an analysis and data storytelling workshop led by Adrian, one of our long-time and dedicated UX volunteers. I'll wrap up the summit with some closing remarks at the end of the day. The entire summit will be recorded and provided as separate session recordings in a few weeks. Please submit questions, comments, and your perspectives throughout using the chat and questions feature. We don't have a questions feature, but you can use the chat if you are participating remotely. Adrian will be my co-MC today, monitoring the chat and questions so that we can respond in real time when possible and appropriate, and Paul is doing that as well. So thank you, guys. All right, so since we are a diverse community of passionate tech for good contributors, we want this to be a safe space for all. Our code of conduct is simple. Please treat everyone with professional courtesy and respect. We don't discriminate based on gender, gender identity and expression, age, sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, political views, education level, previous Orcasound involvement, computing experience, and chosen programming language or tech stack. If you encounter any code of conduct violations, please reach out to me or other Orcasound leadership directly. Before the first session starts, I want to thank the University of Washington eScience Institute for hosting us on location in Seattle. They also provide us with the tech to make this hybrid event possible. I also want to thank everyone who helped plan and put the summit together with me: Valentina, Adrian, Paul, Skander, Scott, Dave Bain, Lillian, and many others. Sorry if I have forgotten, but thank you to everyone who helped. Finally, thanks to all who are participating in the summit this year. Let's make Orcasound the best it can be to benefit orca and marine conservation. Before we begin the session of the day, the first session of the day, I want to address any questions anyone might have. Feel free to type questions in the chat if you're participating remotely. So any questions anyone has here in the room?
I have one.
Yes.
What motivated the summit for you?
Yeah, good question. So I remember, oh yes, so Scott asked what motivated the summit for me. Scott, you and I had conversations a few years ago about possibly doing something like this. And so this was the year I decided to make it happen. So here we are. So yeah, I think with our growing contributor community, it's really important to have everyone contribute their voice into what we should work on. So I thought this was a good way to bring everyone together, both here in Seattle and then broader across the world, really.
Yeah.
So
thank you for the idea.
Yeah.
Do you remember some of the other ways that we it feels like only in the last 5 years have we been intentional about setting goals?
Annually? Maybe in the past, it was even maybe every other year.
Can you hear it?
So I guess I'm wondering if you could if you remember, go over sort of, I think we used the Google Doc, Google Slides a couple of years ago, but just wanted to see if you could convey that, this is kind of an ongoing process of figuring out how to get input and sort of the history of like how it's happened.
yeah, so in years past, since 2020, I put together slide decks and presented my perspective from the UX side of things, and said, hey, how can UX partner with everyone else? And I think that was helpful, but as we grew as a community, especially as we work more incrementally, a meeting like this or an all-day summit like this is really helpful to get everyone's feedback after presenting everything. So yeah, we have the Wednesday meetings in the morning, and that's been great, but that is a very limited time for me to share everything that I wanted to share on the graphic side of things, as well as our cross-functional collaborators as well. So yeah, I just thought, and we've talked about it, like, it'd be great to have a weekend thing or an all-day thing where we could all come together and have some really great discussions and set priorities for the year. So this kind of grew out of, doing PowerPoints and trying to present when and where I could to, all right, let's make this like a community-oriented thing.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be in person with you all here. Post-COVID, it feels novel still. And I think an open question that we can all contemplate today is sort of born of experiments that we've done in the last few years of like, how do we get asynchronous input from the, outside of this, maybe over the next few weeks to sort of set the goals by the end of January for the whole community. And so I feel like we've done Google Docs experiments, and we could go back to that where there's sort of the top 5 projects for the year. But we also have GitHub and a lot of work you put into like organizing projects and project management. So to me, it's an open question, and maybe we should have like an onboarding video that makes all this really clear each year. So I think that a nice outcome for today is like, how do we go beyond this in-person hybrid synchronous event and make sure we get input and organize it for the coming year? It's a challenge. I don't know what the answer is.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree, and I think, as we get more feedback from everyone about how we can do that better, I think we'll continue to learn and grow.
Oh, and we have, thanks to Paul, we have Zulip now too.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Oh, thank you for using it and for dealing with the pain of switching.
Hey, Scott. Anyone else? Questions, comments? All righty. Well, if anyone does have any questions or comments throughout, please post them in the chat.
YouTube, there's a
And we will address those.